Hey, Brad Voorhees is going to come and share. He's with Ignite Local. Brad was with me in India last October, did a great job of sharing his business story. He's spoken for us in Bellevue, and I thought, boy, you need to come back and share some of these things. There are three things I love about Brad that lend to credibility. One is experience. Brad is a serial entrepreneur. That doesn't mean that he eats Wheaties, but he starts businesses all over the place. He loves people. He's all about people, and he's a person of character. And those three things, I think, are really what creates credentials, and those are three things that are part of who he is. So come and share with us, Brad.
I wanted to talk about a couple of things, but I wanted to kind of turn the tables if we could. Instead of me being the speaker, I would like to invite you collectively to do that. There's some things that I'm trying to figure out, and maybe you have wrestled with some of the same things, and I'd be really curious to hear your response. I know that we've got some people in various different industries here. I'm sure that you've struggled with a couple of things that I'm going to talk about here. So I am not a be-all, end-all authority at all. I'm sure there's more business experience in this room here than I have, and I would love to hear back from you. So I want to talk about two things. The first thing, kind of three questions about the first thing. How much, when you're a business leader, how much power and credit is it safe to give away to your team without undermining your own leadership authority and strength? I don't know if any of you have struggled with that before. How vulnerable and transparent can you be as a leader and still not only kind of protect your own leadership position, but the strength of the organization itself that needs a leader that has good foundation? And how does an organization price products or services ethically? We'll get to that right at the end. So I'd like to read a quick paragraph and then ask a couple of questions and see if we can't turn this around a little bit so that I can be the listener and learn from you. So bear with me as I read something here. We're told the best leaders give credit away and that they should empower the people in their organizations. This sounds well and good and very lofty, but in the real world, at what point does leadership self-effacement threaten leadership stability, and so the stability of the organization? The three questions I just mentioned are born of difficult experiences I've had in business, experiences that rightly called for self-examination on my part, and also examination of natural group dynamics, organizational trust, leadership, naivete, and more. My failure to address these questions before challenges to my leadership arose in the past has cost me two organizations that I founded and grew and led to success in the last 10 years. So as I lead my current organization, I want to make sure the lessons inherent in those experiences that I'll tell you a little bit about have been incorporated into how I lead now. And there's some questions I'd like to ask you about that. There's a danger that I could overcompensate from these past experiences I've had in my effort to keep the difficult parts of my past from repeating themselves today. I could become dictatorial and lacking in leadership humility, trying to protect my leadership position for myself and for the organization, so that things that I've experienced in the past that have been very bad for those organizations because they happened could happen again. So I want to hear from you. Other leaders who may have experienced similar challenges and trials. Discussing these issues together could help us all see the picture from viewpoints we may not have previously had benefit of, and so gain perspective and wisdom in how we lead going forward. So my business background is that I was in financial services for a long time. I got out of college and started with Dean Witter as a stockbroker. I did that for 10 years, and then Piper Jaffray for 6 years. So I was in the financial services industry for 16 years and absolutely loved it. Couldn't wait to get to work, hated to go home. I mean, had a wonderful family to go home to, but hated to go home, just loved it. And did very, very well. As I look back, though, I see that the biggest bull market in history was 1984 to 2000, which is exactly when I was there. So maybe it wasn't so much about me, but anyway, it was a great time. But toward the end of that run, 1999, I had a little system that I developed when I was in MBA school in finance that helped me to predict where kind of at what point stock prices, individual stock prices, were kind of stretched and kind of probably not going to go too much higher based on a number of things. And conversely, when stock prices were just really, really a bargain. And so I used that for some years with my clients, with myself, and won Dean Witter's National Stock Selection Contests a number of times in the 90s, and then Piper Jaffray's. So in late 99, my little system was telling me that the stock market was so amazingly overpriced that anybody with a brain in their head would run away. And so I encouraged all my clients to sell and go to the money market. And I left the brokerage industry in 2000, right before it really tanked. So that was really good for me. But then I had to answer the question, what am I going to do now? So I embarked on a kind of a series of entrepreneurial adventures, and in 2003 launched a company called Dinner's Ready. Maybe some of you guys are familiar with it. And that was a great company. It grew to 37 franchises in 8 states in 3 years. It was doing very well, and I had a partner who I was 51% ownership, he 49, and we did that for obvious reasons. We were growing very, very nicely, but at some point, my partner felt like maybe it wasn't so good that there was a majority partner that had final say, and so through a series of kind of stock adjustments, I'll call them, on his part with the advice of his attorney, I was kind of put out on the side, got a buyout that I never got a dime of. So during that time, I tried to be, I think maybe I kind of naturally was, pretty self-effacing as the CEO of the company, the founder of the company. And my wife kept telling me, and you guys, we should listen to our wives. My wife kind of kept whispering in my ear, why are you saying that everybody else did this and they did that and they did that, and when you're doing a lot of this stuff, why don't you give yourself any credit? Don't you think that maybe that will make them feel differently about maybe your leadership and so forth? And I didn't even hear her saying it almost. I can hear it now as I look back. And she was so right. What I did was kind of stab myself in the back. I mean, ultimately, it felt like somebody else did, but it was me who presented that opportunity. And then after that, I started another company that helped small businesses get found on the internet, a company called MoreBiz, not the company I own now. I had founded that company 5 years ago, and it grew very rapidly and nicely. I brought on 3 partners where I kept a double share, 40% of the company, and gave each one of them 20. Well, 20, 20, and 20 adds up to more than 50%. And so they had a different worldview than I did, and so we kind of were not very equally yoked that way, and I didn't think that was a big deal in business. I kind of think differently now. My wife and I went off with a company called Youth with a Mission, and we went to do a discipleship training school, as they call it. So we suffered for 3 months in Hawaii getting training, and then 2 months in Thailand working among the poor. And the whole time that I was gone, I was there. Don't tell them this, but don't tell the mission organizations. I was doing my job as well for MoreBiz. Well, when I came home, I discovered that I had been voted out. And this time I did get a little bit of a buyout, not as much as I should have gotten. So, when that happens to you, one time, shame on you. 2 times, kind of shame on me. And my wife is over here sitting, like I told you this. And so she told me that I did the same thing in the second organization where I was saying, oh man, you're doing such a great job. I'm doing a good job. Nah, you're the one that's doing a good job. And so as I look back on that now, one of the guys I think about is Russell Wilson and the way that he leads the Seahawks. He is so self-effacing. And he's always saying, the team did it. They really delivered. They were great today. He's never holding himself up as the one that should get very much credit. And so, in thinking about all these things, I wanted to kind of put it out there to you guys. I think maybe I've kind of come to grips with this a little bit since the last time I made this talk. But what do you guys think? Does a leader risk the authority and the strength and the credibility of their leadership, the foundation of their leadership within an organization, by giving too much credit away, too much power away, being too self-effacing? Does anybody struggle with that?
Yes.
No? No?
Does anybody struggle with it, or does anybody?
What's that?
Did you say does anybody struggle?
Has anybody struggled with that? And it could be that maybe it is an issue that is more apt to come up in a partnership kind of arrangement, perhaps. And maybe there's not a lot of folks here who have been in partnership, but rather own your own business. But anybody struggle with that at all?
I'm involved fairly closely with somebody who has started a partnership in a company, and kind of like a marriage, I guess, a partnership. Yeah. And it's kind of moving where not him, but the other guy is really controlling the thing. And the one I'm talking with is really struggling with the way he's doing that and wondering what to do with this. Should I do it to dissolve the company or just what to do with it? So that's where we're at.
So maybe this is maybe this is mostly a partnership issue. What I have come to the realization of myself is that in the legal arrangements of the company and in the level of stock ownership, if you have partners, there just needs to be such an overwhelming majority in your own pocket in terms of share ownership and the power that comes with it in order to avoid some of these things happening. That's kind of what I've learned from this. So as I read management books and so forth, and they talk about good leadership being self-effacing and giving credit to your team and extolling the virtues of your team, my own experience has said, no, you try to do that and you keep getting, and so I just wondered if anybody else struggled with that. Yeah.
Brad, I kind of see, and I see a lot of partnerships in my work as a CPA, and the supermajority rule works really nicely. That 50-50 thing, not so much. There's a lot of conflict that's not clearly identified in the partnership agreements or in the shareholder agreements. That everything is great when people are seeing things on the same page, but if there's an event like somebody wants to leave, then there is so much tension there unless there's a supermajority person. And if you're a supermajority person, 66 2/3%, then they can't do anything to you.
Yeah.
And so you can be as self-effacing as you want because your leadership cannot be threatened.
Right. I think really that's the bottom line.
I'll give you an example of what I've done. I started my moon construction company in 1972 as a proprietorship when I was in graduate school at the University of Washington. And then in 1975, I incorporated because I was doing consulting engineering work, and I couldn't run the business, and I needed someone else to run it for me. And he had a different idea of how things would work. I would ask, for example, how are we doing? He says, I don't know, I'll wait till we get our checking account at the end of the month and I'll let you know. And it scared me a little bit, so I incorporated. Then, over the years, what I did was that after you work for me for 5 years, or about 10,000 hours, I give you 1% of my ownership, We've had a dozen people work for us, or a dozen owners over all those years. This is our 44th year. Some have owned more, some as much as 10%. And that has created a very loyal and stable workforce. So I have a group of men that work for me that have been with me for the youngest has been with me 18 years, and the longest one, I mean the ones that are still active, has been with me 37 years. Long time. And we do anything. I mean, we want to do the projects that nobody else wants. I'll give you an example. We got a sewage treatment plant down here in Edmonds, and you got these big tanks. They're about 50 feet in diameter. We built a bridge across one of those tanks for the the city went out and asked for 90 contractors, and we were the only ones that responded.
Wow.
It's a fun job, it's a unique job. I'm reaching a point where I'd like to quit, but we have 5 children, and one of the boys is interested in taking it over. It's a C corp. You just don't walk in and take it over. You got to work your way into the system. What I've done with my men is that when I'm gone, they're allowed to make any decision. And when I come back, if it's the wrong decision or it's hurt us some way, I will say to them, next time when you're faced with this decision, consider these other parameters. So in that sense, in addition to giving them authority to run the company while I'm gone, I'm encouraging them at the same time. And that's the kind of transparency that you were asking about in your first question. Mm-hmm. It's worked very well for us. And so that I've created a number of companies and done a similar thing. And the idea is that I want to bless the next, that individual. So did you go to Kona?
I did, yeah.
When did you do that?
About 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
So the Ohana court that you met in,
Yes.
I built that.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Wow.
So there we have some connection there.
Okay.
And I built the plaza.
Wow. Wow.
100,000 tiles that are on those little.
Yeah.
We're all did those. Anyway.
I heard them mention the wonderful contractor that built the Ohana court a number of times. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're being well thought of there. Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that. The other thing that I thought would be fun to talk about is the table talk question here. This is something that I've struggled with in my current business. The question of what do we charge for the products or services that we sell? Our Econ 101 professors would tell us that there is this thing called price elasticity, and that we should charge as much as we can for what we sell. If we charge too much, people quit buying it, but we just want to charge as much as we can, not down here somewhere, just right up here. And who knows, maybe your profit margin, depending on the industry you're in and the age of that industry, newer industries are more Wild West, the older ones. The one I'm currently in is kind of Wild West. You can get 30 and 40% profit margins, but should you? So a question that I have struggled with is, if we live in a completely amoral marketplace, not immoral, just amoral, our Econ 101 professor would tell us that we should just charge as much as we can, charge what the market will bear. Over time, competition will come up, our price will have to come down, but right now, while the opportunity is there, charge all you can. That's one school of thought, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but I have a hard time with that. We sell our services to small businesses that are trying to make a living themselves, and I have a hard time with that. So for us, for the little company that I'm part of now, we try to make our services priced very fairly in kind of the definition I've come up with. And I wanted to share that definition with you and just ask you kind of what you think about this, because sometimes I think I struggle with a little bit of naivete. And I think that's what's gotten me in trouble a little bit in the situations that I've talked about before. Maybe a little bit too trusting, a little bit too naive. And perhaps I am in this pricing area as well. But I guess here's what helps me to look myself in the mirror and sleep well at night and think maybe when I'm all done with my run on this earth that in the business sense, that I will have done well. Not necessarily as much financially, but just done well in terms of doing right. And that is that on our website, we talk about doing business by the golden rule. Doing unto our clients what we would hope that they would do unto us if the tables were turned. So we've set up our pricing in such a way that if I were to sit down with a client and say, here is exactly what we charge, here's how much goes in our pocket, here's how much we pay out to other vendors that we need to bring in to support what we're doing for you, here's exactly what we do, here's how much we're making. If we were that transparent with them, would they feel like they were getting a good and fair deal, or would they feel like they're being gouged? And so for me, that's kind of a litmus test that helps me to understand where our prices should be. Now, there's a young man who's a member of our family who is in a new business. Probably a lot of you have heard about it. I won't mention it. But it's kind of a Wild West industry as well. The thing has just grown like crazy. Profit margins are astronomical. And this young man has gotten wealthy overnight. Maybe that's the way things are supposed to be. I mean, it happened to Bill Gates, right? Maybe that's the way that things are supposed to be. I just wonder, does anybody have any feeling about this whole idea of getting as much as you can for what you sell, or serving your client, not maybe trying to exact as much money out of them as you can, your client or your customer, but serving them fairly? Am I naive here? What do you think?
We run into it. I'll give you an example. I would say that the less exposure, the better. But I'll give you the example that we run across. We'll bid a project, and if it's private work, often the client will want a schedule of values. How much are we charging for framing? How much are we charging for drywall? And on down the list, bottom line. And then when you sit down, when they go to evaluate the bids, they will say, well, gee, this other contractor can do this for less, this line item for less. How come you're doing it for more? And at that point, the relationship is over, because you just can't compete in that type of exposure. And that it could be that you don't know what the answer is on that particular thing. You got to look, and we have two other categories. We have what's called general conditions, and that's the kind of stuff that's involved with just related to your job on the site. And then we have our overhead and profit as different line items. And we've had people say, well, gee, this guy charges less profit than you. Would you be willing to reduce your price? And the answer, you can't do that. And I think that one of the keys is the relationship that you have with the client. If we're going to say, if you were to purchase a bidding or an estimating package, software package, it'll say it'll take 1.32 hours to complete this task. It doesn't take 1.32 hours. It'll take 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever. And that's how we will bid the project, because we know that it's going to take more or it's going to take less. And that's our charitable side of it. That's where we're a benefit to the client, to that relationship. If something takes us longer, we've got that built in a little bit, because we've said you can't do it in 1.3, it's going to take 2. And that kind of a thing. But the problem with exposure is that we'll also run into what's called bid shopping, in which you give a bid, and then the client will go say, well, I have my neighbor's a contractor. I think he can do it for less, and he's using your number as your reference. So the less exposure, that would be my side.
So that's an interesting term, exposure. And what you mean by that, I'm assuming, is exposing to the client or customer that you are looking to work with kind of all of the inner workings of what you're doing.
Too much
Okay.
detail.
Okay. Yeah. And boy, I received that. Was
your hand going up, Jack?
It wasn't, but I do have a thought or two.
Please, Jack, share.
Well, business is it's a combination of art and science. And as we were talking around the table here, that I think as long as you can look at yourself at the end of the day and feel that you're giving value, but we're all wearing shirts that we got at different types of stores. I mean, everybody could get a shirt at Goodwill. Some people choose to go to Nordstrom, some people choose to go to Macy's, some people choose to go to the Gap. You're going to have different price points, but those people feel they're getting value. And so that's one element, but the number of variables just are astronomical. And so that's when you have to try to meld something that makes sense.
Yeah.
Some of the, downstream considerations are if you're a public corporation and you have investors who want to be able to retire someday or go on vacation, you can't sell at a break-even point and expect them to get any return on their money.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of considerations in the pricing model there.
Sure. Thank you. Anybody else at all? John, I think, are we about that at the time?
You got 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay. This is interesting. We did this little talk over in Bellevue a couple months ago and got some different kinds of answers than these. I'm a little bit more settled in my own mind about some of these things now, but these are really great comments. That's a very interesting one, the idea of exposure or maybe too much transparency. Not that you want to hide anything, but maybe, again, transparency is being too exposed to attack or danger or whatever. That's a good one. So thank you for your input. As I said, I was hoping that I would be the learner and you guys the teachers, so you've done that. So thank you very much.